What's up? My name's Ethan,
I'm Ben.
I'm Kabir.
and welcome to our 5th episode on forgiveness and forgiving. So I know that's kind of a curveball considering what we've been talking about. You know, we talked about happiness, friendship, time management, but I think our goal truly is to pick things that are kind of unique and talk about unique things that aren't discussed enough, especially amongst high schoolers. So this is our first attempt, right, at finding something a little bit more abstract and something that we can unpack that's not really like book reporty, right? It's just, that's what we're talking about today, forgiveness and forgiving. So, Ben, do you want to go ahead and read our mission statement real quick?
Yeah, so we read this before every episode to kind of let you know what our goal is, and it's important when you consider, what we're saying in the episode. Depression, anxiety, or that uneasy, empty, or lonely feeling inside of you is very common and normal amongst high schoolers, but it is not talked about. The goal of this show is to make you feel like your experiences are normal and recognized. We will also give you practical solutions to improve your life. Mind Matters is the only podcast that talks about these ugly feelings from a high school perspective.
Yeah, so we're going to intro with a few interesting facts about conflict and why finding forgiveness is way more of a problem than some people may think. So, first one, 39% of Americans have had at least one recent serious argument with a close friend and or family member.
Let's go around the table. Let's see if this checks out here. Kabir?
Of course. Yeah, I agree with that.
No, not do you agree. Have you had a recent serious argument with a close friend?
Yes, I have.
Okay, Ethan?
I wouldn't say serious because I think this is getting at like serious relationship breaking. I don't know.
Oh, in that case, no.
No, I don't think that's
Really?
that's what they meant.
Okay, well, serious argument? No, yeah.
I would say yeah.
Kabir,
so
what
I
about
guess
you?
it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
guess
we're
like
at a
66.7. So
that kind of backs that one up. Next
Yeah.
one. Do you guys want to read the next one?
yeah, so 16% stop talking to that close friend or family member as a result.
So out of you two, does that check out?
No.
No.
No, that does not check out.
All right. Next one. 17% block that close friend or family member on social media. No.
Once.
Once. Okay.
No.
No. Okay. 13% of people went on to completely end the relationship with their close friend or family member. No.
No.
Yes.
I can actually think of a few right now. So I think,
Actually, yeah.
yeah. So I think we actually can kind of resonate with these a little bit more. But that just goes to show you I was blown away when it said 39% of Americans have
Yeah.
had serious relationship ending type arguments. I didn't think it was that common. But the reason why we say all this is because we think the root cause is the difficulty of forgiving someone. So we're going to really
Yeah.
unpack that today. So do
And obviously, the impact is a lot of stress and trepidation in your life.
And we preach mental health. Forgiveness is, in my eyes, like this like void that you have inside of yourself. And if you don't get your thoughts out and you talk with that person, it's just like an empty part of yourself, right? So we'll go around, say our definitions real quickly like we do for every episode. So I guess I just said mine, right? It's like a piece of inside of you. If you break off this relationship, it's like this little hole that's just there, and it will never get filled back with something unless you get it off your chest or you go talk to someone about it. That's kind of my definition. What about you guys?
Yeah, so for me, I would say that forgiveness really comes down to coming to terms with other people's actions or your own actions without compromising on your values. What I mean by that is, frequently it's said that you should forgive someone or condone, and that often has the implication of condoning their actions. But in reality, that's not what forgiveness is, right? Forgiveness isn't just accepting what someone else did. It's making sure that you can come to terms with that past incident and make sure that you have hope for the future, right? So by not just letting them get away with it, you are letting yourself move on while also, giving them the correct consequence for their actions.
Mm-hmm. Ben?
I think it's getting over what happened and stop kind of sensationalizing what happened and realizing it's not as big of a deal as you previously thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you're mad at somebody for.
Yeah. So I think forgiveness is hard because when you have an argument with someone, right, it gets very, very tense, right? And you can be very angry at each other. And I think you hold on to that. And over time, it's like a snowball effect. I think it actually like gets worse and worse and can kind of compound when it might have just been something as stupid as, oh, you didn't pay me back for this thing, right? It can be something very small that can grow and grow and grow unnecessarily. So that's my first, I guess, point. But another one that I have is forgiveness is a conscious choice. It doesn't just happen naturally. Amends don't just happen, right? It's something that you have to put effort into, and you kind of have to be very deliberate about it, or else it's simply just never going to happen.
Yeah, I think part of the effort also is time. A lot of people want to, forgive right away and, make up right away. But a lot of the times that's not, or all the time, that's not human nature. So I think allowing time to pass is part of the effort that's given, because it's painful to have to deal with kind of that stress maybe for an extended period of time. But dealing with that stress is part of the effort to let yourself get over it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and by withholding forgiveness, you're not actually helping yourself, right? You're not like, just because you put it off, it's not going to make things better for you. You're actually just letting that anger and that hurt fester until, it becomes an unbearable thing. So instead of letting it build up over time and degrading your quality of life, it's better to just make a deliberate effort, as Ethan said, and get it done as fast as possible. Or when the time is right, of course, but not let it sit there for a while and just grow and grow and put it out of your mind.
Yeah, so moving on, I think those are some good intro points, but we really want to talk about our experiences and how we see that play out, in high school experiences too. So I have a question for you guys. Who do you think out of your circle of friends, family, whatever, who do you think is the hardest to forgive and why? What kind of person? It could be like a family, friend, teacher, coach. I mean, we can go around. I still have to think a little bit, but do any of you guys want to go?
I would say teacher is actually the hardest to forgive.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, at least for us when we're in a class, we put in a lot of effort, and I hold grudges. I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's kind of hard to let that go, because after the class or something you didn't like, you never really see them again, and you never really have the opportunity for you to forgive them.
Yeah.
So, and it's something you put a lot of effort into, because after maybe they treated you unfairly or gave you a bad grade you didn't deserve, it's not like you just quit trying, right? And with family members, after that happens, you keep on trying and it gets better, but maybe that didn't happen in the class. I think it's very hard to forgive.
Yeah, and I think since we all place a lot of emphasis on our schoolwork and we take pride in that, I think when a teacher does something hurtful, I mean, I wouldn't say giving a student a bad grade is hurtful.
I mean, students do hold grudges for that.
That's true. Yeah. So in that sense, I guess forgiving is hard because your grades, if your grades matter to you, it's hard to accept the fact that maybe your teacher just didn't like your work, right? So I think that's a good point that you bring up. Kabir?
For me, it's actually the opposite. Sometimes I often find forgiving family members more difficult than forgiving people who aren't as close to me.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, when I get into conflicts with people who maybe I'm a little bit more distant with,
yeah,
I don't really take it as personally because they don't know me as well as the people who are close to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when someone close to me breaks my trust or does something that I would consider wrong,
yeah,
I kind of hold it more seriously because they've known me, they know my values more than this other person, maybe even a friend or a teacher or whatever. But I think that when someone knows you deeply and still does something to hurt you, I think it's personally harder to forgive them, even if you have more time and you're going to see them for a longer amount.
I definitely agree with Kabir on that one. My friends and my peers in high school, I feel like we joke around a lot. We say hurtful things. But at the end of the day, we're all friends, right? And that's kind of just the short term. I wouldn't say short term, but kind of what we have is more nonchalant and like friendly. But with my family, like the people I've been with my entire life, when we get into arguments, it's not the same level because it's like you're constantly spending time with them and they're the people, that I love most. So it's like when you get into arguments with your family, it's like a whole nother level than just arguing with your friend about some like, some random thing. And I think the people you love most, when you get into arguments and you find a hard time forgiving them, that's when it's the most detrimental because, again, I was saying this little void inside yourself that is just a bigger hole, right? Depending on how close you are to that person. But something I want to bring up, we're talking a lot about different people right now, but I was thinking about it. Like in high school, the hardest person that I feel like I can't forgive is myself. I feel like I don't show myself enough grace. I dwell in the past. And I feel like a lot of high schoolers struggle with that,
Yeah, I 100% agree that it's very hard to forgive yourself because it's something you can control, right? Your past actions were in the time something you can control, so there's really no excuse for what happened. You can make excuses for other people, but people try to make excuses for themselves a lot, but they really don't work.
Yeah. And I feel like in high school, there's a lot of complex things that you got to navigate. For me, like mood swings, right? You're still learning what you want to do, right? You're still figuring yourself out. And I think it's hard to just forgive yourself on these past actions. And I think people need to show high schoolers a little bit more grace. Like there's so much on their plates with school and with sports. And I just think forgiving myself is probably the hardest. But yeah, Kabir, you had something to say?
Yeah, for me, I think I also agree that self-forgiveness is something that many people need to practice, especially people our age, because in high school, a lot of people haven't yet developed good study habits. And so, including myself, they'll make poor decisions about how to, spend their time. And sometimes, actually a lot of the time, that involves procrastination, right? So you would say that you're going to do something at this time, but then you push it back, right? And I've woken up countless times in at the middle of the night and noticed that I haven't done what I needed to do for the next day, and so I just have to scramble and do that. And the entire time I'm regretting it and blaming myself for the lack of foresight, right? So I think although that's a personal mistake, it's still something you can't just hold yourself account. I mean, you can't just blame yourself for that forever, right? You need to, at some point, you need to accept that you made a mistake and move on.
And I think a big part of it is like showing yourself grace. Like you have to understand you make mistakes, especially in high school. You're handling so many things. It's okay to mess up on a test or at a game or kind of get mad at your family member or your friend. But something I want to add right now that kind of ties this up is this little saying, right? You are not your past. You're how you accept your past and then move on from your past, right? So I think that's very applicable here because if you're going through a lot of stuff, you have to understand that, yeah, your past is something that's with you, but what's more important is how you accept that and respond and change going forward. So I think in terms of forgiving yourself, that's like my biggest tip. So
yeah, let's talk about kind of forgiveness and its role in our daily lives as high schoolers. Ethan and Kabir, either of you, what is the role that forgiveness plays in your daily life, and how does it affect you and your mental health?
Kabir, you want to go?
Yeah, for me, I think on a daily basis, forgiveness involves, especially with my family, I don't really get into many arguments at school with people that would involve like true forgiveness. But at home, sometimes I get into conflicts with either my sibling or my parents about, things related to my schedule usually, like when I decide to do certain things. And although it's minor, these things kind of tend to build up over time if they're not resolved. And so we kind of make time every day to, talk to each other about our plans and make sure that they align so that we don't get into any conflicts in the future. Like these can just be like minor conversations, but they go a long way in terms of making sure that we don't like have major disagreements about stuff in the future.
So I think also something in terms of high school and people I find hard to forgive. I mean, I kind of said it, right? It's myself. I feel like I have so much regret in how I treat people and how I respond to things and how I make decisions, whether it's staying up an hour later than just hurting myself, not getting enough sleep the last night, or saying something hurtful to one of my parents that I didn't mean just because I had a long day at school. It's really hard for me. I think I have so much on my plate, and it's just hard to give myself some grace and forgive myself and say, okay, you made that mistake, but forgive yourself in terms of, okay, accept it and move on, right? So.
Yeah, forgiveness plays a huge role in my daily life, and a lot of it, as Ethan talked about, has to do with forgiving myself. I make decisions that I don't like, I mean, not on a major level, but on a minor level each day. And I've had trouble in the past of kind of like moving on and not like hyper focusing on that. I still do a lot, but it's gotten better, I'd say. And now I'm better at moving on and not worrying so much about a decision I made that I didn't like, maybe an hour ago.
Yeah.
During the day.
So something else that I kind of want to mention now that we've kind of talked about forgiving yourself is the idea of what is forgiveness, right? Like in terms of someone did something bad, how do you go about that? And Kabir, I think you have some notes on this, but what do you think's a big misconception? Like, are you forgetting? Are you condoning? Like, what are you doing? Like, how do you forgive actually?
Like,
and how do you apologize too?
Yeah.
Right. So, some of the common myths that exist around forgiveness is that forgiveness involves condoning the person's actions, right? The idea is that if you want to forgive someone, you have to absolve them of what they've done, or or else you're never really going to let that go. But that's not true. Like, you can totally forgive someone, but still acknowledge that they did what they did and that it was not okay, right? So that brings me to my point about the fact that forgiveness really has nothing to do with the other person. It's really just about how you want to treat yourself, because forgiveness is fundamentally about letting yourself move beyond what another person or yourself have done, right?
Yeah.
So forgiveness is not just letting them escape from the blame. It's about letting yourself move on and giving yourself hope for the future.
That's a very interesting point that you bring up about how forgiving doesn't have to do with the other person. It has to do with you and your values. And I think that's something a lot of people don't think about, because it has to do so much with mental health. People think forgiveness is external factors. If they do this, I'll forgive them. If they do that, it doesn't change what's happened. There's you can't exactly fix something wrong unless it's very objective, if it violated your values and standards. Like Kabir, you said you become very offended, or it's harder to forgive when a family member or somebody close gets into an argument with you or wrongs you because they know you well and they violated your values, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's much that when somebody does that to you and violates your values, it's incredibly hard to forgive them, and it's hard to make that up. So a lot of it has to do with your own mind and convincing yourself that it's okay and it's time to move on, right? And it's better to move on. So that has to do a lot with mental health and stress, because kind of maybe even questioning your own values. Like, do I want to keep this friendship, or do I want to keep these values going on that I've had for a while? That causes a lot of stress because it has to do with your own identity. That's why forgiveness ties to so much of this, and it is so important.
Yeah. I really like that. And I think, how we always say, how do I forgive you? How do I, it's always about the other person. How do I make amends with the other person? But I think, like you guys said, it's a lot about how do I look inwards and how do I fill this gap in a healthy way and not let it fester and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think the first thing you need to do to understand is that forgiving is not saying what they did is okay. Like, I'm not saying if someone does something really bad or says something really hurtful, forgiving is not, okay, fine, maybe, you know what, that kind of makes sense. You were angry, you were upset, and in this moment, fine, I get it. You don't have to justify their actions, right? It's not about that. It's about saying, how do I not justify it, but how do I deal with it myself? Do I have to look inward and say, okay, what they said, I'm not going to justify it, but I'm going to say, like Ben said, what do you value? Are they your friend? Are they your parent, your sibling? And you don't have to justify it, but you have to look inwards and say, is it worth keeping inside, even though it's really messed up? Or can we move past that because I value this friendship?
Yeah, I think people play the game of like forgiving, like whatever. It's probably easier to forgive this person, move on. Okay, I'm not gonna focus on something else. People play it like a game, but it's not a game because you're forgiving, and it's easier. You move on, whatever. You can focus on your homework. You can do what you want. You forgive somebody so they can be included in this plan, and then you and your friends can go do this, and like it all works out. People play that game, but they don't realize that while they're saving their weekend plans or whatever by including this other person and kind of playing the social game, they're hurting themselves.
Yeah.
Because they have not gotten to a point where they're ready to forgive, and they're doing it for external factors and not internal factors, and people do that a lot. And I would assert without a doubt that that's one of the most degrading factors to mental health.
Yeah. And there's one thing. I was browsing last night. I was just wanted some more substance for our conversation, considering, this is a little tricky, right? We're not always forgiving. But something that I saw that I really wanted to mention is when you're trying to make amends with someone and you're trying to forgive them, this is a good way to do it. Ready? I recognize what you did, but it's not okay. I'm not going to justify what you did, but I know you're more than that. You're more than a slip up after a long day at work. You're more than a simple lie that you made. It's still hurtful. It's not right, but you're more than that. You're my friend. You're my son. You're my whatever. And you add that label at the end because at the end of the day, they're more than just their actions. They're someone you love. They're someone you prioritize. And making amends that way, right? Not justifying what they said, but filling that gap in your relationship, I think that's key.
Yeah, I really like that idea of emphasizing your relationship with that person above all, right? More than just what they did, right? Mm-hmm. As a person, they are beyond their actions, right? But I think at this point, it would be a worthy inclusion to mention like another kind of myth that I've encountered. It's that some acts are unforgivable. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I agree with that. Okay. I agree that some acts just do not have any justification, right?
Exactly.
But going back to the point about forgiveness being for yourself, it does not matter what the other person did. It's about your ability to accept that, to come to terms with it, and to create hope for yourself in the future. Mm-hmm. So like, regardless of what type of, transgression this person did, your ability to live life entirely depends on your own mental state. What they've done is already in the past, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing is going to change about what they did, no matter what. So it's simply about how you approach it. And the easiest way, or the most meaningful way to help yourself in that situation, is to forgive them, because that clears up space and fills that void in your own heart.
So I want to offer up a quick point. If you don't do this, what's the common alternative that people kind of look to? Instead of forgiving, what's this?
Forget.
Human, yes, but what's another like human instinct? You did something bad.
Just to hold a grudge, right?
And I gotta get revenge,
yes,
right? Like
revenge.
you have this vengeance. So I feel like we should unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, so it was funny you bring that up because I did some research into revenge and human nature, and there was a recent study actually by Swiss scientists.
You got it, bro.
A little trouble pronunciating there. It's okay. We all have problems. Swiss scientists, and what they did was they did this game. You've heard it, split or steal, right? So what happens is there's like a pot of money, right? And both people can say split. If both people say split, then each gets half of the money. If one person says steal and the other one says split, the person who said steal gets all the money, and if they both say steal, nobody gets anything. So they did a study on people who said split and the other person said steal, and obviously who felt betrayed and who were their friends.
Yeah.
And what they had them do is think about revenge on them, and what they noticed was that, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this area of the brain right, but the caudate nucleus in the brain was highly activated during that time, and that part of the brain is known for processing reward. So this confirms a long-held theory that revenge is sweet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
So
So
revenge is sweet. We know that. We know that. Ethan, do you think revenge is sweet sometimes?
It's like a piece of candy. You eat it, it feels good, but then you're like, did I really need to do that? Did I really need to eat that after
Kabir,
dinner?
that's a great reference. I love that, Ethan.
Kabir.
This is genius. Kabir?
sometimes I think revenge can be felt without the consequences in minor situations.
Yeah.
If it's a big,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes
So revenge is
doesn't-
sweet. Revenge is sweet.
Yeah.
But you know, but a lot of times it doesn't apply in our lives, right? Because the reason that revenge is sweet and we have evolved to process revenge in such a sweet way is that in older times, in like caveman times, enemies were much more clear, right? It was your tribe against the other tribe, so it was about sending a message. You know what I mean? Because if you didn't get revenge, if you didn't get revenge, other people would come and, you know, do wrongdoing upon you.
Yeah.
And it was a deterrent. But now things are a little bit more complicated. And getting revenge in a world where there's not clear enemies, there are a lot of, you know,
Fake
different
people,
things.
social media.
Social media. All of these things, it makes it much more complicated, and revenge is usually not a very good option. So it's one of these conditions where humans have evolved, but now it's not, you know, as applicable as it once was. Obviously, revenge is, you know, still a big part of everybody's lives. Revenge is sweet. We all know it. We're programmed that way. But it's not very applicable now, and it's human nature to want revenge.
Yeah.
So I have one last thought, right? Like, why do people forgive? What is the end goal in forgiving?
To move on.
To move on, to make peace, to feel a sense
heal.
of freedom, to
Yeah.
heal. But vengeance is not freedom. You're digging the hole. It's already at 3 feet. You just made it 6 feet because you have to undo more things, right? And I know that's very cliche, but it's quite literally like digging a deeper hole. That's the best way I think.
Yeah, and it's almost like an illusion, right? You think you're making your situation
Yeah, like
better.
you did this to me, so I can do this to you.
Yeah.
But if you sit and think about it, right? Like then you're lowering yourself to their standards of their wrongdoings. It's complex to think about, but I think it really makes sense. So, do you guys have any more quick notes before we head into our favorite part, the coping mechanisms?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there-
Go.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. So I was watching this TED Talk yesterday. It's called "Forgiveness Sets You Free," and it was about like this interesting case study about ex-convicts re-entering society, you know, and trying to integrate with, you know, social institutions. And, you know, I'm sure that after rehabilitation, these people still felt a lot of regret about what they had done if they were guilty, right? But I think, you know, if they were able to move on and achieve genuine personal development in society, which that study tracked, and they did go on to be pretty successful, I think that, you know, coming to terms with your mistakes in the past is definitely achievable for most people, no matter what you've done. I think one of the problems with the human mind is that it just gets fixated on everything you do wrong and doesn't register the good things, right? So I think that if you are going to forgive yourself, you might as well just acknowledge some of these stories about, you know, some of the worst things that have happened, and people still have found it in themselves to forgive. So no matter how hopeless you think the situation is, there is still hope.
Yeah, and I just want to add this quick thing. This is kind of more like big picture type things. But life's short. I mean, if you think about it, like It's short. And if you want to hold grudges and hold on to these things and just keep this void inside yourself, it's much easier said than done. It's uncomfortable. I mean, I hope everyone understands forgiving is uncomfortable, but you might as well, right, work towards filling that gap inside yourself instead of letting it fester until you're 80, 90 years old. You're like, man, things could have been differently, right? And I feel like that's easy for us to say because at least I don't have like really, really bad relationships like that. But I feel like that's a pretty good tip. Ben, do you have any like quick notes before I get into the coping stuff?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's said about revenge and what Kabir talked about. And I think it's important to consider, and I keep on saying it with revenge, and I think that this is a good leeway into the coping strategy.
Okay. Yeah, let's get into that.
Yeah, is allowing time, right? Because people want revenge right away. They want to get back at people right away. But the only way to kind of let that die down and kind of move on and suppress maybe that problematic evolution in humans is to allow for time. And I think that is also a misconception. Like parents, people want you to apologize right away, make it better right away. You better apologize. You did something wrong. Apologize right away.
That's not human nature.
That's not human nature. It doesn't work. It only makes it much worse because then you forgive and you hurt yourself.
And it's artificial. It's
artificial.
Not like
So
I'm really.
You have to let time, and people will.
I think
people will
that's
make it
amazing.
right. And if they don't, then they don't. But I think you have to let time be. Let time go on and see what happens.
Exactly. Because if you make someone apologize, it's not genuine.
Yeah, it's not
For sure.
genuine.
All right. So my coping strategy.
Or
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah.
No, you're good, bro.
Or like threatening. Parents will be like, "Well, if you don't apologize, I'll do this. I'll take
Especially
something away."
with high
That's like literally the
schoolers.
worst thing you
Yeah.
can do.
Yeah.
It's so
I
stupid
think
to do
having
that.
those real conversations is so much more productive. It's something my parents and we work on instead of just jumping straight to you messed up or forgive right now. It's like, why are we upset, right? And it's kind of cringy, it's kind of corny, it's uncomfortable, but it's much more productive. So for the coping mechanisms, I have a little cheesy, I don't know, what is it called, where you have like this same letter and then
alliteration.
That I kind of came up with. It's called the 6 R's of forgiveness. Ready?
Uh-huh.
All right.
Yeah.
First is recognize. You have to, quick pause. If you're like taking notes, which I doubt any of our listeners are, but this is actually really practical and I recommend like writing this down somewhere. So the 6 R's of forgiveness. 1 is recognize. So that's acknowledging the hurt. Confession, get to the bottom of things. If you don't get to the root problem and you just cover it up with something else, you're never going to get to true forgiveness or making amends. So that's 1, recognize. 2 is remorse. This takes time, being regretful for your mistakes. So when your parent says, forgive me, or you messed up, right? And you owe me an apology. That's not, like we said, that's artificial. That kid is not actually going to be regretful because they're just trying to get out of the punishment, right? So finding remorse, finding like a true sense of yourself, yeah, I messed up, and you actually have to be regretful for your mistakes, or else you're not going to make amends. It's always going to be fake. So that's 2, remorse. 3 is kind of a big word, restitution. So this is kind of the easy part. Once you've identified, got to the bottom of things, you're regretful for what you did, you can make amends, you can correct things, right? And this is pretty straightforward. It can be a conversation. I think it can really only be a face-to-face conversation, but if you think texting or whatever, I mean, you do you. Then so that's 3, restitution. Number 4 is reform. So change your behavior so it doesn't repeat again, right? So I forgot, what's that quote? It's like the same action will lead to you being insane if you don't change anything.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definition of
Yeah,
insanity.
and I feel like a lot of relationships
Trying the
are
same
kind of
thing,
like a
expecting different
circular
results.
thing. And this is a very sensitive topic, and I don't want this to come off the right way. But you know how domestic violence works, right? It's like forgiving, and then it's like a circle of like behavior, and it's really messed up. But I think if you don't want stuff like that to happen, I know that was kind of an odd example, but
No, it's okay.
right? I think you need to change in order to accept healing. Number 5 is rebuild. So you start putting intentional effort every single day with that person. It's like little building blocks, little things you can do, whether it's sharing lunch or just talking about your days. It's very small things, but they add up over time. And then, so that's 5, rebuild. And 6, result, freedom. peace, right?
Yeah.
So those are my 6 R's, I guess, for forgiveness. Kabir, do you have any
Yeah, I
coping?
think that's really interesting. I think very comprehensive.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that, some of the most important ways to move on from something is to first learn how forgiveness works on a deeper level. So, for example, if you've wronged someone, instead of if you want to know anything about what forgiveness is, you have to be willing to apologize and express your feelings about how wrong you were to do that thing. Like, you don't want to just bottle it up or keep that guilt inside. And making amends with the person you've harmed is the first step in self-forgiveness, because if you haven't made it up to that person, how are you ever going to find it in yourself to forgive what you've done, right? So I think something really important is not only forgiving or not only apologizing, but also improving based on that apology, kind of like what you said, right? Making amends, trying to be better. I think that's an integral part of forgiveness. And if you don't do that, if you don't have that in your process, you're never going to really be able to achieve true forgiveness.
Yeah. So I think, coping mechanisms, we try to give pretty practical stuff that you can implement. So I think the last thing we're going to add, I'll go first. What is one action that you think it's kind of overlooked that you can it's helping facilitate this forgiving process or making amends? What's one thing you can do? I'll go first, okay? Something that I think it's actually the opposite. It's kind of used too much, like, oh, go do this when you get home, and people don't understand the significance of it. But for me, this is journaling. So I feel like a lot of times with these complex things, you have thoughts and ideas in your head, right? And it's like a whole pool of things. And for me, it's something that helps, whether it's on the notes app on my phone or like writing it down on a piece of paper. You like formally write it out and map it out, and you can see all your problems and like say, okay, I'm going to go about it this way or that way, or I'm going to put my effort into this or that. So that's my practical tip that helps with forgiving. Do you guys have any like little practical actions?
Yeah, I think that something you can do to kind of start the forgiveness process, right, is kind of like interacting a little bit with the person you're going to forgive, like saying hi or whatever you want to do. Because if you're so isolated from that person, right, if you're so isolated from that person, it becomes harder and harder to forgive them because you don't see humanity in them. And if you interact with them as like hi, it doesn't have to be like a nice hi, still mad at them, but like just say like nod or whatever. It establishes more humanity in them and makes it easier to forgive them.
Right. Along those lines, I think something that a lot of people should consider when they're trying to forgive someone is reconnecting with them in terms of like assessing relationships. Like how, like for example, like if your close friend, remind yourself of the times that you've enjoyed together. Remind yourself of your experiences as friends, right? That will help you reconnect with your original relationship with them. And even if you're in kind of a difficult status as friends, reminding yourself that you share this connection of friendship, kind of like what we were talking about earlier. You are still my friend. You are still my son, right? So reminding yourself that your relationship, the bond outweighs individual mistakes, even if those mistakes seem like the end of the world in the moment, right? Reminding yourself that those things, those foundations will still exist.
Yeah, I like that. I think Kabir just also touched on the big picture. I think that's like both coping mechanism and a big picture idea. But my big picture idea that I have to offer is kind of what I said earlier. Life's short, high school's short, and if you have something in your mind like, oh, I'm going to do life this way, I'm going to make these friendships, and the only thing that's holding you back is forgiveness or forgiving someone or ending these grudges, look inwards. Say, is it worth it? Are these 4 years of high school really worth it to just not talk to this person who I loved all throughout my childhood, right? So you got to think quite literally big picture. Ben, do you have any like big picture?
So we talk a lot about finding your why on this show, and it's a
Yeah.
little hard to connect to forgiveness. It's much easier to connect to time management and motivation and, pursuit of happiness and all these other things with recovery, but it's a little bit harder to connect to forgiveness. But just because it's harder doesn't mean it's valuable to connect it, because finding your why and your purpose is very, very important.
Yeah.
And obviously, undoubtedly contributes to mental health well-being. So if you know your why, I think you'll be more focused on that than the complications of forgiveness and friendship. It gives you something to fall back on instead of obsessing over little things. I talked about forgiving yourself, right? When you have a purpose, something you're working for, something you're striving for, it's much easier to forgive yourself and move on, because
Yeah.
you're not focused on like little things when you're moving kind of direct in a manner without direction.
I like that. And something to add on, like your why. I know we kind of all share ours, but like I know I've said this already, but like my why, I feel like that I've trying to work towards is like service and helping other people. That's what drives me every day. So I feel like if your lack of ability to make amends and forgive someone, if it contradicts your mission statement, your why in life, I mean that should be your up top, like your holy grail. You know what I'm saying? And if forgiveness is what holds that back, right? That's just another reason to start, doing this uncomfortable, time-consuming yet very rewarding process. So, real quick before we get into a few announcements about everything that's been going on, I know it's been a while. Fun fact: forgiveness science. It actually, there's been scientific studies, and it releases neurotransmitters like dopamine, reduces your cortisol, your stress levels, and that it can be almost instant. Like you do this, the amount of relief you feel, it'll quite literally feel like taking something really heavy off your back, right? So, yeah, fun fact there. But some announcements. Wow, it's been a while. It's
Go
been
to www.mindmatterspodcast.net.
Yes.
Follow us on Facebook,
Twitter.
LinkedIn, Twitter, X.
And then there's a really cool thing. I encourage anyone who's listening.
Sign up for our mailing list.
Yes. So I'm not gonna
contact us. Fill out the form.
yeah.
Tell us your feedback.
I'm not gonna be like, go do this right now, but our mailing list is very comprehensive, and it kind of sums up what we talked about in that episode. And then it also offers some like next steps if you want to get in
If you
contact
hate our
with us.
voices, there's a huge new development. You don't have to listen to that.
Yeah.
You can sign up for the
You
mailing
just read
list.
it. You just read
Yeah, and then if you have any tips and things, recommendations, I mean, we want that. That's why we do that. We want to feel like, it's helping people. And, just looking ahead, right? Let me just quickly say it again. www.mindmatterspodcast.net. So you can go to that for all the information.
Yes.
Yeah.
But something I want to kind of preface is, we're kind of in the dog days right now with school. Ben, Kabir, and I were so extremely busy. Semester 2, junior year, it's just such a grind. I'm starting baseball. We're still doing ACTs. They've got their DECA stuff coming
Yeah.
up, right?
Yeah.
It's just really a grind, but it's Friday afternoon and we're talking about forgiveness. Like, who would have thought? I think it's kind of like looking back on this, like a few years ago, I'd be like, that's kind of odd. But I just feel like it's something that's really rewarding for us.
Yes.
Other people.
Definitely. And also I wanted to emphasize, if you like the mailing list, if you like what I say, forward it. But not because, we want people to see our names, but because it's
spread the
important to
message.
break the stigma,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
That's the main thing I think we do. I think it's the main thing we do here, raising awareness and breaking the stigma from a high school perspective. No high schoolers are talking about this. So,
I wouldn't say no, but
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
not many.
Yeah.
Kabir, anything else to add before you go?
Yeah. So I was just on Instagram the other day and I saw this post of like old people and their regrets, right? You don't want to be one of those people who just has this thing that they've been holding on to for so many years and they just haven't gotten a resolution. So when it comes to forgiveness, what matters is doing it as soon as it feels appropriate and not just letting it fester. I think that's just the main thing we need to understand about that.
Yeah. So once again, www.mindmatterspodcast.net. You can go ahead and visit that and sign up for everything, find our socials. But I guess that's it for today. Enjoy your Super Bowl weekend. And yeah, we'll see you next time. My name's Ethan.
I'm Ben.
I'm Kabir.
And just remember, your mind matters.